Okay, let's unpack this. Think about something you really rely on, something that just, well, works for you, right? Day in, day out.
Like your car, maybe.
Exactly, like your car that gets you everywhere, even if you miss a few washes. Or maybe some tool at work that performs perfectly, even if it looks a bit beat up.
Yeah, you know it's dependable.
Right. But deep down, you also kind of know that even those super reliable things, the ones performing great right now, they still benefit from some thoughtful attention. They can get, oh, dirty.
Absolutely. We often take high-performance stuff for granted, especially when it just keeps delivering. But, buildup happens, friction occurs.
Mhm.
And even if it seems totally fine, ignoring that quiet accumulation, that can lead to, well, diminished performance or maybe issues later on. It's about being proactive.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing a deep dive today into maintaining something where performance and reliability are, well, they're absolutely non-negotiable. A handgun.
Specifically, a Glock.
Specifically a Glock, yeah. We've been looking at source material from an expert. This guy runs a custom shop, and he's taking us through cleaning his own Glock 34 competition gun.
And this isn't just a quick wipe down either.
No, no. He's doing this after putting about 3,000 rounds through it.
3,000 rounds. That's a significant amount, especially for a competition gun where, reliability is everything.
Totally.
So the mission for this deep dive is really to pull out the essential knowledge from his practical approach. We want the key steps, sure, but maybe more importantly, the kind of surprising whys behind what he does.
Like what really makes a difference.
Exactly. What are the crucial details for performance, for longevity, and, for your own confidence in the firearm?
He sets the scene really well, too. He says his Glock 34 has been flawless for these 3,000 rounds, zero malfunctions.
Which says a lot about modern guns and ammo.
Right. He contrasts it with his father's old 30-06. Back then, with the corrosive ammo they used.
Oh, yeah, a whole different beast.
You had to meticulously clean it every single time.
Yeah.
Because that residue would literally pit and rust the metal.
Yeah, it's a stark difference. Modern powders, modern primers, they're way less corrosive. That's why his Glock can run 3,000 rounds without just seizing up.
And this is key.
But yeah, he emphasizes that while it was performing perfectly from the outside, when he takes it apart,
it is dirty inside.
Visibly dirty. It's kind of the perfect case study, really. Even a top performer isn't immune to residue buildup.
So this isn't just about looking clean. It's genuinely maintenance, right? Preventing future problems.
Precisely. Think of cleaning as like essential preventative maintenance. It's about dealing with friction and that residue buildup before it can cause a malfunction or mess with performance or accuracy.
Even with modern ammo.
Yeah, even with non-corrosive ammo, you still get carbon, unburned powder, all that stuff accumulated.
And before you even think about cleaning, he hammers home one step that is absolutely critical, non-negotiable.
Safety has to be number one.
Always.
Every single time you handle a firearm for cleaning or really any work, you must confirm it's unloaded. The process he outlines, it's standard, but worth saying again because it saves lives.
So step one.
Remove the magazine first, always. Then cycle the slide racket back and forth multiple times to make sure any round that might be in the chamber gets ejected.
Okay.
Then physically inspect the chamber, look into it, stick your finger in there, double check it's empty.
And he adds another layer here that I thought was really important. No ammunition anywhere near you. Not in the room, not on the workbench while you're cleaning.
Yes. That's such a critical safety layer, and it gets overlooked sometimes. Keep the ammo totally separate. It removes any chance of accidentally loading the gun when you're focused on cleaning.
Makes sense.
So once you've confirmed it's empty, point it in a safe direction, pull the trigger to decock it. Now it's safe to start working.
Okay. Safety procedure lockdown. Feels fundamental, but good to reiterate.
Yeah.
Let's talk tools. He keeps it surprisingly simple, doesn't he?
He really does. He makes the point that gun cleaning doesn't need to be this super complicated thing with tons of expensive gadgets.
Right.
A basic, inexpensive gun cleaning kit usually does the trick. A rod, brushes, some cleaning solution, patches.
Maybe some Q-tips?
Yeah, Q-tips are good for little nooks and crannies. But his preference for cleaning cloths, just plain paper towels.
Paper towels. That kind of caught my attention.
Yeah.
Why paper towels over, say, reusable wags?
It's really about containing the mess. Once a paper towel gets dirty with all that gunk.
You just toss it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Toss it out along with the grime. You're not washing dirty rags. You're not potentially spreading that residue around your workspace. It's efficient, keeps things cleaner.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
disposable. Okay, Teal's ready, gun is confirmed safe. How do you actually start taking this Glock apart?
Right, next step is field stripping. For a Glock, you grab the slide, pull it back just a tiny bit, maybe like a quarter of an inch.
Wow.
While you're holding it there, you pull down the slide lock levers, those little tabs on both sides of the frame, pull them down simultaneously.
He mentions his has an extended one.
Yeah, he says his extended lever makes it a little easier, but the standard one works fine too. And here's a critical tip. Hold on to the slide as you release it forward.
Ah, so it doesn't just fly off or drop.
Exactly. You guide it forward, right off the frame. You don't want it slamming onto your workbench or the floor. Could damage the sight or the frame itself.
Gotcha.
Once that upper receiver, the slide assembly is off, you just lift out the barrel and the recoil spring assembly. Pretty straightforward.
And at this point, you can start to see some of the custom work on his gun, right?
Yeah, you see things like his slide cuts,
Yeah.
maybe the modified frame grip, but the basic disassembly and cleaning process, it's the same for pretty much any Glock.
So looking inside after 3,000 rounds,
Mm-hmm.
where does this gunk, as he calls it, show up most?
He points out several spots pretty clearly. The trigger bar, especially that top part, the bird's eye area that's supposed to be polished and smooth, it's just black with residue.
Wow.
The inside walls of the frame where that trigger bar rubs back and forth, significant buildup there too.
Okay.
Then on the underside is the slide. The rails are dirty, obviously, but especially the safety plunger, that little pin, and the channel it rides in that's usually pretty caked.
And the barrel?
Oh yeah, the barrel. Outside shows carbon. Inside the board definitely shows buildup. He also mentions his internal custom parts are visible now, like a heavy tungsten guide rod he uses for weight.
To manage recoil.
Right, helps with recoil. And a lighter recoil spring of 15-pound instead of the factory 17, which he uses to tune the gun's cycling speed to his shooting rhythm. But again, the cleaning approach is the same, regardless of those mods.
So you see all this dirt. What's his philosophy on actually getting rid of it? Is it just elbow grease and hard scrubbing?
No, actually, his philosophy is key here. He says, less is more. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. He uses CLP, that stands for Cleaner, Lubricant, Preservative. It's a common gun care product that does all three jobs.
Multitasker.
Yeah. And here's another little tip he shares. Don't dip your dirty brushes or patches directly into the main bottle of cleaner.
Ah, course them out first.
Exactly. Pour a little into a separate cap or small container. That way you don't contaminate your whole supply of clean solvent.
Good practice.
And the core cleaning technique, it's not brute force. Apply the CLP to the dirty areas and let it sit for a bit.
Let it work.
Yeah, let it percolate or cook, as he puts it. Give the solvent time to break down and loosen up all that baked-on residue before you start scrubbing or wiping hard. Let the cleaner do the heavy lifting for you.
Letting it cook makes sense.
Okay.
So once the CLP has had a chance to soak in, where does he typically start the actual cleaning?
He often starts with the frame.
Hmm.
And he focuses really intently on those areas inside the frame where the trigger bar rubs against the polymer walls.
Right, where you saw that buildup.
Exactly. Apply CLP there, then use a paper towel or maybe a brush to wipe it out. And this is where he shares a really important insight, one of those why this matters moments.
Yeah.
He says he's actually seen guns completely seize up during competitions because this specific spot was neglected. The residue builds up so thick it just stops the trigger bar from moving. Sometimes it requires literally scraping the gunk off to get it working again.
Wow. Scraping gunk off a trigger bar mid-match. That's a bad day.
Definitely. So cleaning that path, he says, is probably the most critical thing you do on the frame.
Okay, message received on the frame. What about the slide next?
For the slide, same idea. Apply CLP to the underside, especially the rails where it contacts the frame. And pay close attention to that safety plunger, the little pin on the underside and the channel it moves up and down in.
Gets gunked up easily.
Very easily. Use paper towels first to get the loose stuff off. For stubborn spots, like maybe on the plunger itself, use a brush, nylon, or copper. He's very firm on this. Never use a steel brush.
Scratch at the metal.
Yeah, it can scratch and damage the surfaces. Q-tips are also great here for getting right into those narrow rail channels on the slide.
Got it. He also really emphasizes cleaning the breech face and the extractor. Why are those two spots so important?
Okay, so the breech face, that's the flat part on the slide where the back end of the cartridge rests when a round is chambered.
Right.
Has to be clean. If there's buildup there, the cartridge might not sit perfectly flush and square against it.
Which affects accuracy.
Absolutely, it can definitely impact accuracy. And the extractor, that little claw or hook on the side of the breech face, its job is to grab the rim of the spent casing and pull it out of the chamber after you fire.
So if that's dirty, Failure to eject.
Precisely. If there's carbon or residue built up under that little claw, it might not be able to get a good grip on the casing rim. Result: failure to extract, failure to eject a malfunction.
Makes sense.
He does note that Glocks generally have pretty robust extractors that tend to work even when a bit dirty, maybe compared to other platforms like, say, 1911s, where he's seen dirty extractors cause problems more often.
But still important to clean.
Oh, yeah. Keeping that breech face flat and clean and getting under that extractor claw with some CLP and a brush that's vital for reliable feeding and extraction.
Okay. Now the barrel. Obviously pretty central to accuracy. What's his method there, and are there any hard and fast rules?
There is one very firm rule he follows, and it's a key takeaway. Always clean the bore the inside of the barrel, starting from the chamber end and pushing outwards towards the muzzle.
Only one direction.
Only one direction. Never pull a brush or a patch back into the barrel bore after it has exited the muzzle.
Okay, why is he so strict about that? What's the potential harm?
His reasoning is that pulling a dirty brush or patch back through even a softer copper or brass brush could potentially drag abrasive grit and carbon back across the rifling.
The lands and grooves.
Exactly. Over time, that could theoretically cause microscopic scratches or wear, potentially affecting accuracy. He kind of sees the bore like a one-way street for the bullet, right?
Yeah.
So your cleaning tools should follow that same path. Push it through. If you need to brush again, you either unscrew the brush from the rod or remove the patch and start again from the chamber end. Push through, don't pull back.
Got it. Push through, don't pull back. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And for patches, wet one first, then dry.
Yep. Run a patch wet with CLP through. Maybe let it soak for a minute if it's really dirty, then run dry patches through until they start coming out clean.
He also mentioned a specific technique for the chamber itself, didn't he? The part where the cartridge sits.
Yes, good point. Like the chamber is slightly wider than the bore itself, so to clean it effectively, he suggests using a doubled up patch on your cleaning jag.
Ah, gives him more bulk.
Right. It creates more surface area and fills the chamber diameter better, so you get good contact to really scrub out any carbon or sometimes lacquer residue in there. Ensures rounds will seat properly.
What about the other parts of the barrel, like the outside or the ramp?
Yeah, the feed ramp, that polished slope where the round slides up from the magazine into the chamber, definitely needs to be clean and smooth. A brush works well there. Also, the barrel hood, that blocking part at the back end, and the locking lugs underneath it where the barrel locks up into the slide.
All important for function.
Crucial. Keeping the bore, the chamber, the feed ramp, and that barrel hood clean ensures the barrel locks up consistently in the same place within the slide every time. And that consistent lockup is absolutely fundamental for good accuracy.
He mentioned his wasn't too bad after 3,000 jacketed rounds.
Right. Modern jacketed ammo is relatively clean, but he did stress if you're shooting unjacketed lead bullets or maybe some types of reloads, you'll likely need to clean the bore and chamber much more frequently and thoroughly to deal with potential lead fouling and heavier carbon buildup.
Good distinction. Okay, so we've covered the frame, slide, breech face, extractor, and the barrel, chamber to muzzle. What about the trigger bar itself once it's out of the frame?
Right, you usually take the trigger assembly out for better access. Now, the back edge of the trigger bar doesn't really rub on anything significant, but the front side, where it interacts with the connector piece and that polished bird's eye area on top, those definitely collect residue.
So same process.
Pretty much. Apply CLP, let it sit a moment, then use a brush, a bristle or copper one, and wipe it down. Getting that area clean reduces friction, which contributes to a smoother, maybe even slightly lighter feeling trigger pull.
Makes sense. And the other small parts, like the locking block or the guide rod, do they need a deep clean?
Usually, no.
Yeah.
He says just a simple wipe down with a paper towel is typically sufficient for those. They don't tend to accumulate enough residue to actually cause function problems.
Okay, so everything's clean, wiped dry. Next step is lubrication, right? Oiling.
Yep. And just like with cleaning, his philosophy is very specific about how and where you apply that oil.
And I think I heard him say less is more again here. And definitely avoid over-oiling.
Absolutely critical. The goal is a light, precise application of lubricant only on the key metal-on-metal contact points. Over-oiling is honestly one of the biggest mistakes people make.
Why is that so bad? Seems counterintuitive.
Because excess oil is like a magnet. It attracts and holds on to unburnt powder residue, dirt, dust, lint, everything. It mixes together and creates this gritty, abrasive paste.
Ah.
Yeah, and that paste actually increases friction and wear, and it can definitely cause malfunctions. A tiny bit of oil placed precisely where it's needed is far, far better than just soaking the whole gun down.
So precision is key. How do you get that precision?
He strongly recommends using a needle tip applicator or adapter on your oil bottle. Something like the gun butter pen adapter he uses lets you put just a single tiny drop exactly where you want it.
Okay, so armed with that needle tip, where exactly do you put that light film or single drop of oil? What are the essential spots?
There are several key points. On the trigger bar assembly, after it's back in the frame, one tiny drop right where the trigger bar meets the connector piece in the back, and maybe one tiny drop under the arm of the connector itself.
Okay.
On the barrel, a very light line of oil on the barrel hood, that blocky part at the back, and also on the very top surface where you can usually see wear marks from it rubbing against the inside of the slide.
And just leave the line. Or spread it.
Spread it lightly. Use your finger or a clean paper towel, but don't wipe it off. Just spread that thin film around.
Mhm.
Also put a little oil on the sides of the barrel near the muzzle and on the locking lugs underneath.
Got it. Barrel hood, top, sides, lugs. What about the slide?
On the slide, just a little bit of oil on the top and bottom surfaces of the slide rails, the grooves that ride on the frame rails.
Or the frame itself.
Just a little oil on the frame rails too, the metal tabs at the front and rear where the slide rides, and maybe a tiny touch on that trigger bar bird's eye area you cleaned earlier. That's pretty much it.
That seems quite minimal, actually. Very targeted.
Exactly, less is more.
Now, are there places you should absolutely not put oil? He seemed pretty specific about this.
Yes, absolutely. And this is another one of those crucial, maybe non-obvious details he points out. Do not put oil on the side of the trigger bar where it rubs against the inside of the polymer frame.
Why not? Seems like a friction point.
Because the CLP you use during cleaning leaves behind enough of a lubricating film there. Adding oil will just attract and hold on to powder residue and gunk right in that critical spot you just worked hard to clean.
Ah, counterproductive.
Totally. Also, and this is really important, do not put oil down inside the hole where the safety plunger sits on the underside of the slide.
Okay, why not there?
Because oil in that tight space can potentially create hydraulic pressure. It might prevent the plunger from depressing fully and easily when the trigger bar pushes it up. That could interfere with the safety mechanism or even affect trigger feel. Keep that channel dry.
Wow, okay. No oil on the trigger bar side against the frame, and definitely none in the safety plunger hole. Those are really specific points to remember. All right, time to put it all back together. Does the order of reassembly matter much?
It absolutely does, especially when you're putting the components back into the frame and installing the pins.
Okay.
So after you've placed the trigger shoe and bar assembly back in and the locking block at the front of the frame, the pin installation order is critical. The locking block pin, the bigger pin above the trigger, must go in before the trigger pin.
Locking block pin first, then trigger pin. Why that specific sequence? What happens if you mix them up?
Because the locking block pin is what correctly captures the little spring for the slide stop lever underneath it. If you put the trigger pin in first, that slide stop spring won't be seated properly under the locking block pin.
And the result?
Your slide stop probably won't function correctly. It might not reliably lock the slide back when the magazine is empty, or it might not drop smoothly when you press it. So locking block pin in first, make sure it captures that spring. Then the trigger pin goes in, which captures the trigger assembly itself and the slide stop lever.
And the last pin?
The trigger housing pin at the very back of the frame goes in last. Pretty simple. Then you just reassemble the upper, put the barrel and the guide rod recoil spring back into the slide. He does mention his non-captured guide rod spring can be a little fussier to get seated than a standard factory one.
Okay.
And then carefully slide the completed upper assembly back onto the frame, making sure the slide rails line up correctly with the frame rails. Should slide right on.
And once it's all back together, any final steps?
Yep. Rack the slide back and forth vigorously several times, maybe 5 to 10 times. This helps distribute that tiny amount of oil you applied onto those critical contact surfaces.
Works it in.
Exactly. Then just give the exterior of the gun a quick wipe down with a clean paper towel to remove any excess oil or fingerprints. He also mentions his quick pre-match tune-up is often just hitting the barrel hood and the slide rails with a tiny drop of oil. Simple, fast, keeps it running smooth between deeper cleans.
So he figures this whole process, once you get the hang of it, only takes about, what, 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, maybe 15, 20 minutes tops. It's not like it's hours of painstaking work.
Right.
And the payoff is pretty significant. By going through these steps, by focusing on those key areas he points out, you really build your understanding of how your specific gun functions, where the critical friction points are, what really needs attention.
And that understanding, that knowledge, it translates directly into confidence, doesn't it? Confidence in its reliability.
Exactly. You're not just, wiping off dirt. You're performing maintenance that directly ensures the gun performs reliably and accurately when you need it to. It's not just about having a clean gun. It's about having a gun you understand and can genuinely trust.
So to kind of wrap up this deep dive then, we've seen how incredibly durable modern firearms like this Glock are. They can run thousands of rounds flawlessly.
Yep, they're tough.
But they still absolutely benefit from focused, thoughtful maintenance. And safety is the absolute non-negotiable starting point every single time.
Couldn't agree more. And simple, inexpensive tools are totally sufficient, especially those disposable paper towels, surprisingly effective, Ari.
Yeah, that was a good tip. And the crucial cleaning focus isn't everywhere. It's on those specific friction and buildup points.
Yeah.
The trigger bar path inside the frame,
Uh-huh. The underside of the slide, especially that safety plunger and its channel.
the breech face, and under the extractor claw.
Right. And the barrel bore, chamber, feed ramp, hood, always remembering that chamber to muzzle, one-way cleaning direction for the bore.
And then for lubrication, less is definitely more. Precise light oiling only on those specific metal-on-metal contact points.
And just as important, knowing those critical spots not to oil, like the side of the trigger bar against the frame, and definitely not in the safety plunger hole.
Right. And remembering that reassembly order, particularly for the frame pins, is actually critical for proper function.
Following these steps, it really does keep your gun running smoothly, reliably, accurately. And maybe just as valuable, it builds your confidence not just in the firearm itself, but in your own understanding and your ability to maintain it properly.
You know, we've explored how really meticulous, detail-oriented maintenance, like checking for those tiny bits of gunk, ensuring smooth movement on key parts, applying lubrication just so, can dramatically impact the function and reliability of a complex mechanical system like a handgun, something that's designed for performance under pressure. It makes you wonder, how might applying that same kind of focused, detail-oriented approach, actively looking for the gunk or the friction points, ensuring components move smoothly, how might that translate to the other complex systems we navigate or rely on in our own lives, whether that's, personal habits, professional workflows, maybe even the dynamics within a team or a relationship?